for me, creates a great sense of pride that we were able to catch this guy. I didn't make commander. I didn't promote to commander on that list. But the end result was, went to the Robbery Homicide Division, had that great experience there, and I promoted to commander anyway.
Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast here with the IA guy. Today's guest is not only special in general, but it's special to me, Commander Kyle Jackson, a very, very important figure and mentor in my career. When I made sergeant back in 2007, a year later in 2008, I crossed paths with the commander, and he taught me so much about being professional, about being a good leader, and definitely honed in on my sergeant skills. So, on that note, we're going to get to know the commander pretty well, so stay tuned. Here we come. Okay, here we are, Code 6 with the commander. Thank you for coming, man. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
I always say everyone that comes in is a special guest, but for me, this is special first degree because you had a really big impact on my career. So I'm really going to enjoy our conversation that we're going to have today because we're going to get to know you a little bit better. And just wanted to let you know, thank you for teaching me a lot, and we'll talk about that. So I just want to take the time at least to say thank you.
Got it.
Okay, well, you know what? Hey, doctor, let's get to it. Look, this is an internal affairs podcast, and like I always say, there's so many reasons to doing this is because one of them is it's a topic that's a bit taboo and not many people talk about. You could agree to that.
Yes.
And so what I like to know right off the bat is, look, you came on the job in 1977, which means that you were a young police officer in the early 80s. So my question to you is, what impression did you get of internal affairs, or what did your training officers or anyone in the department tell you about internal affairs back then?
Yeah, when I was a probationary officer in 78, after that period of academy training, internal affairs was invisible to me and to most young cops. We didn't see it because we were insulated by our training officers, and pretty much everything that occurred was based on what they did, how they led us and how they guided us. And so internal affairs wasn't something that I was overly concerned with. It wasn't until I came from under the wings of a training officer and I was a police officer kind of on my own with another partner that internal affairs became a figure that was more prominent, an entity to be concerned about, because we felt that if you did the wrong thing, internal affairs was coming. And when I say internal affairs was coming, it wasn't so much in the sense that someone was coming from downtown. Mm-hmm. It was that there was a process that was going to be initiated such that this complaint and this investigation would end up in internal affairs. And we always felt that once it got up there, and if you did the wrong thing, and it can be shown, the hammer was going to come. There was going to be some pressure, there were going to be some sanctions, there were going to be perhaps some suspensions, and depending on what you got involved in, you could lose your job. So that was my early impression, not so much as a probationary officer, but more so as a P2, and certainly as I matured within the organization as a P3 and beyond.
Yeah, I beg to ask, was there any one of your training officers while you were on probation that just told you, hey, stay away from them, they're the dark side? What I'm trying to get to is that there's this stigma that comes with internal affairs, that we're the dark side and the rat squad, et cetera, et cetera. And so is there any way that we would like to know, where did that come from, or how is that label come about back then, which, by the way, it's still in existence until today?
Internal affairs, it's the dark room. You don't know the personnel that are there. You rarely meet them unless they have to come out and interview you because the case is a significant case. Mm-hmm. Most of the investigations occurred in the geographic area, and it went to the commanding officer for adjudication and then to internal affairs. Internal affairs was the dark room. You didn't know what was going on up there, but you always knew, as I mentioned, if you did the wrong thing, they were not going to let you slide. It was just going to be whatever the facts are, whatever the evidence is, we'll make a determination what will happen from there. So,
let me ask you this. If you're in a room full of internal affairs sergeants that are beginning this assignment,
yes.
What's the one thing you will want them to know about that job?
Yeah, there's this core value, integrity in all we say and do. You have to look at every case in a clinical sense, not in the sense of, oh, he's a good guy, she's a good person. You have to look at it in a clinical way because it's unfair, fundamentally would be unfair to have an allegation sustained when in fact there's evidence that the officer wasn't involved in an act of misconduct. But on the other hand, when the evidence is clear, in a very clinical way, if the evidence is clear that the officer violated department rule, policy, procedure, or engaged in some conduct that embarrassed the department, and the evidence is there, the allegation has to be sustained and the officer's behavior has to be modified so there's no recurrence. So I would say to those investigators, just do what's right. Follow the facts and follow the evidence and present the case to the adjudicator in a very clinical way so that we can find the truth of the matter. I think that's what's important.
What type of traits or characteristics would you want out of an internal affairs investigator?
We'll start off with integrity, personal honesty. Because if we don't have that, then there's no way that we can say any investigation is a valid, well-researched, well-investigated case. We can't say that if the officer or the supervisor or the investigator that's conducting the investigation is not a person of integrity. Certainly in terms of the skill set, we want a person that understands the department's rules, policies, and procedures, particularly as it relates to issues of misconduct and the department's disciplinary process. And we want someone with good writing skills because that's what you do. You write a lot. You are looking for someone with outstanding communication skills because you're going to have to interview lots and lots and lots of people. And if you don't have the ability to do that, then how can you solicit the information that you need to resolve a matter? And you have to be able to deal with all kinds of people. It can't just be people that you're comfortable with. Oh, I'm a black investigator. I can only talk to black complainants. You have to be able to talk to everybody in a way that makes them comfortable so that they can share with you what they saw or what they know.
I beg to ask, you're describing competence. In a sense. In your career, you've dealt with some IA investigators. Has the ones that you've dealt with had that level of competency in terms of the skill set or no?
Yeah, I think once you are assigned to Internal Affairs Division, I mean, there's a process you have to go through, and they won't just take anybody. You have to go on alone. They could have an opportunity to look at your work, look at how you respond to people, look at your character, your ability to work with other investigators, and to take direction, and to work under pressure, because there's a lot of pressure to finish cases. Because in all cases, there's a statute of limitations, and sometimes we're up against that statute. So you have to be able to work at a very quick pace. And so we want those investigators to be the kind of people that can work hard and that can produce, but do it with integrity so we get the final product. And we want the final product to be what? the truth of the matter.
You never worked internal affairs?
No.
Any particular reasons why?
Well, when I promoted to sergeant, I immediately was offered a job at EODD,
Okay.
as the officer in charge of the recruitment unit. And I did that for a period, and I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe if I ever want to promote to lieutenant, I need to have an opportunity in the field to work as an assistant watch commander. So I took a position that was available there, and not too soon after that, I promoted to lieutenant. So that wasn't available to me because I kind of moved quickly in the sergeant rank. And the experience that I received, actually, in retrospect, as an assistant watch commander was really, really good for me in terms of my foundation as a lead supervisor in field operations. And it helped me as a lieutenant, and it helped me as a command officer.
Which brings you to our next segment, is a trip down memory lane. Let's do it. So September 1977.
Yes.
Then to Newton in 1978, right? Right after the academy, you went to Newton Division. I know you made a field training officer, P3, in 1981 in Wilshire.
Yes.
Then you made P3+1, which we know as a senior lead officer in Wilshire.
Right.
Congratulations, you made sergeant in Pacific on your promotion, 1985.
Yes.
And then, just like you spoke about EODD and recruitment in 1986, you got your rocker, your sergeant 2.
Right.
And to hone your skills, you went as an assistant watch commander to Pacific. Congratulations, another promotion again in 1992 as a lieutenant. Went back to Wilshire. You ended up, after that, you went to jail division on a project.
Yes.
A special project that you were working on. We were talking about that. And then you got your 2 spot over at Devonshire Division.
Yes.
Congratulations. Now it's the real deal. Here you are, Command Staff Officer, Captain 1 in Van Nuys in January of 2000. Then you went to BAD, Burglary Auto Theft Division, in Captain 2, as a Captain 2. And then here we are again, another upgrade to Captain 3 at Northeast in 2002, Southwest in 2004, and Robbery Homicide, the Elite. The place to be in 2005. And you weren't done. You were almost close to end of watch, and they made you commander. Congratulations again on your promotion to Criminal Gang Homicide Group in 2006,
yes,
where you and I met, and I worked for you in 2008 is when I met you on your way out. And then the watch, you called it October 2009. That is 30-plus years. That would be
32 years.
32 years of service. Thank you so much for that.
Yes.
But look, we were talking about the challenges of a young police officer in the early 80s that you were. How would we compare that to a young police officer in today's LAPD? Because I'm sure back then you had many challenges. I know you had a lot of division, a lot of bias, maybe even you experienced some racism. Let us know a little bit about what was it like being a young police officer in Wilshire?
Yeah. You know, Wilshire was a great experience. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of good people there, and a lot of good supervisors, a lot of good cops. And I always felt that the command staff there were fair. But when I looked around the landscape, looked at the landscape of the department, African Americans and women and Latinos and Asians were not represented. There weren't very many of us. I think at the time that I came on, probably 85% of the department was white. And to say that does not mean, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. It's just what it was. And I think the department at the time, particularly because of the Franchise Blake lawsuit, were forced to hire underrepresented groups at an accelerated pace so that we could have more diversity within the department. And we knew that was going on, and certainly we cheered that because the city of Los Angeles was becoming more and more diverse. And I always believed that if I were a person in the community and a police officer or police unit drove up, I sure would feel much more comfortable if I saw a black cop get out of the car, just for my own personal comfort. And so as I looked around the landscape, I saw that the diversity that we needed was not there, but it was coming. But all of the training officers, for the most part, were white. All of the supervisors were white. All of the lieutenants, for the most part, were white. All of the command officers were white. And it just, I sometimes felt that I had to be careful because I didn't want to upset anything and create a situation where there would be something directed toward me in a sense that would reflect some type of racial bias or animus. So I was very careful about that. I always made certain that everything that I had to do was in order, was correct, was as perfect as I could make it be, because I just didn't want someone to say, "Oh, that black guy couldn't do this, or he couldn't do that, or he forgot that." And so I was very mindful of that. And so were a number of other African Americans. We were very, very careful about being in order because there were too few of us around at the time.
Which brings me to talk about your boy, your ace, your man, your guy, Kenny Garner, who passed away in March of 2009. That's a whole different story. But you guys were tight. And did you guys, because of everything that you just explained, did you feel as though, you know what, maybe we should rise up the ranks to see if we can treat people different?
Well, you know, you have all of this idealism, you know, what you hope to be when the day is done. And we were police officer twos in a patrol unit, and just talking about our careers and how we would build our careers. And we jokingly said, one day we're going to run South Bureau, which we actually ended up doing at the end of our careers. And, Kenny, I met him when I was in college, and I recruited him to become a member of my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity.
Okay.
And I never intended to join the police department. I never wanted to be a cop. But he encouraged me to apply, and I did, went through the process, and the position was offered, and I declined it 3 or 4 times because I never really intended to do it. And then there was the last list on a particular class, and they told me, well, if you don't come in now, you're going to have to start the process all over again. I was 24 years old at the time, and I figured, I was working with the city of Long Beach as a community service analyst at the time. I said to myself, well, if I don't like it, if it's not for me, I can always quit and put it on the resume and do something else. So Kenny talked to me, encouraged me. He said, come to the academy and just let's go for a walk so I can show you the academy. And when I got there, he introduced me to Jim Tatro, former commander, LAPD, rest in peace. And he just really worked me hard and convinced me that I should do it, and talked about all of the opportunities within the department. And he indicated that anything you can do in public service, you can do on the Los Angeles Police Department. So I came in, and going back to Kenny, we were working together and just encouraged each other. We promoted to P3, we promoted to sergeant, we promoted to lieutenant and captain on the same list. So that was my guy.
Yes, he was good to me. I know he was my commanding officer of lieutenants. Well, I should say commanding officer of detectives in Foothill when I was on probation, and I thought the world of him. And we can get into that later because it was him who hired me to meet you.
Right.
So we'll talk about that a little later. I got a question about. You're a sergeant, and before we get into sergeants, I know I asked you this before, and I of course I got to ask, the riots, man, the 1992 riots. I believe you were a lieutenant. Just out of curiosity, when the verdict came down, where were you? at, and were you given like a heads up? Did you guys know that it was going to happen, or what was that like?
I was at Devonshire at the time, and as I recall, when the verdict were read in the squad room, there was a big cheer. When the officers were exonerated, there's a big cheer. And I never thought that there would be a riot. I never thought that. I grew up in Watts, and in 1965 we had already experienced that, and we knew how devastating that was for the city. And I thought at the time that we had moved beyond that and we wouldn't destroy the places where we lived, but I think there was so much frustration and so much anger with the manner in which Rodney King experienced what he experienced, that people said, no, that's wrong. Police officers don't get to do that. They just don't get to do that. And then right after that, we saw on television there was the initial attack at Parker Center, where they destroyed the information booth that was out in front. No one ever used it, but it was there. And then it took off throughout the city. And people might say, oh, Devonshire, it's, kind of Sleepy Hollow. They don't do that kind of thing out there. But yeah, they were burning buildings and looting and setting cars ablaze and all of that. And were we ready for that? No. No, we were not ready for it. And that was a tough time.
Yeah, no,
that was a tough time.
I can only imagine the division that it created. Lots of lessons learned.
Yeah.
In terms of how to apply force, use of force investigations. It's a gamut of lessons learned from that incident.
Yeah.
Here we are. Look, you made lieutenant. I know sergeant, lieutenant. You made captain. What I really want to hone in on is, as a sergeant, I know you must have doing some intakes.
Yes.
Of course, you did internal affairs. Complaints, intakes. We used to call 181s, 128s.
Right.
And what we call IAs is what they call them. But what I'm more interested to know from an adjudicator's lens, because you became a captain, and this is where we're going to go into the next segment about an IA story, because you certainly have plenty of stories, but a hot topic that's going on right now is it's going to be on the ballot again this November about LAPD's discipline system. So I would like to begin to ask you is, what are your thoughts of the disciplinary system back when you were an adjudicator, and is there anything that you would like to change about it?
Well, that's difficult for me to answer because I don't know what's going on now.
Correct.
But I think the process that we had to undergo as an adjudicator, I thought was fair because, as I mentioned before, when a complaint came to me and I needed to prepare what's called a letter of transmittal, I would look at all of the allegations, look at all of the interviews from all of the parties, and look at all of the facts, the fundamental facts that were available for me to look at that related to the allegations. That part for me was easy because either it was there or it wasn't. If it was there, I would sustain the allegation. It's there. The facts and the evidence are there. The witnesses, the complainant, any physical evidence, if it supported the allegation, I would sustain it. If it was questionable and we're not sure, well, I don't know, I would have to not resolve it. I couldn't resolve it because the facts were insufficient for me to make a judgment. I could not resolve it. And then if the evidence was such that it was clear that the officer did not commit the act of misconduct as alleged, I would unfound it. that part was easy. Now, when we talk about the rationale for all of that, that's where the work really comes, because you have to explain yourself. You got to support you. You got to support your adjudication. You have to support it. And if you didn't do it with integrity, when it got to internal affairs, or when it went to the bureau, but then ultimately when it went to internal affairs, they would see it, and they would either kick it back or it would be military endorsed. So you had to make certain that what you did as an adjudicator was appropriate based on, and I keep saying this, based on the facts and the evidence. Not my opinion, not how I'm feeling on a Thursday,
Right.
but based on the empirical data, the data that's available.
Or could it be that, I know this person?
You invalidate the process when you do that. And the department and all of the officers are depending on us to do the right thing. Oh, let me hook him up. Let me hook her up. She's a good worker. Let me take care of her. You can't do that.
Have you seen it done?
Yes.
Do you feel that there's too many levels of review?
No. I don't. It comes to me as a command officer.
Okay.
It goes to the bureau, and they look at what my judgment is, how I've adjudicated the complaint. They agree with me. They don't. Maybe I missed something. And then ultimately, it goes to internal affairs. I think it's R&E that looks at it and makes certain that the adjudication is consistent and the recommendation for a penalty is consistent with the department's standard. And if that's the case, then it goes to the commanding officer of internal affairs. He takes it to the chief of police with the recommendation that's made. No, we need all of those reviews.
Have you been challenged with your decision making?
I have been, yes.
Can you share, or can you recall at least one where?
Yes, when I was at Northeast in particular, and this was during a period when there were so many complaints coming through the entire department. And so we were hustling. We were really, really working hard to try to manage those cases. And I would send a number of complaints up the chain of command to the bureau. And this one particular commander would military endorse me. And then I would respond to him. And then it went to internal affairs, and 80% of the case, they agreed with me. And I was challenged by the deputy chief. Kyle, I can see that a number of your cases have been military endorsed by the commander. I says, respectfully, chief, did he share with you, has it been shared with you that in 80% of the case, internal affairs agreed with me? So, and I mean, I didn't take it as anything personally or anything personal. That's just the process. Mm-hmm. He sees it, he saw it from one perspective, and I saw it from a different perspective. And then it goes to another level of review, and I think that's good. That's why we need all of those levels.
Is there a double standard when it comes to command staff versus just a rank and file in terms of discipline? I
don't have any data to support that one way or the other, but I will say this. Yes. Command officers, in my view, just based on my own experience, when complaints would come in involving command officers, they would, in many cases, they would disappear. And it was very rare where you would ever hear about a command officer being suspended for an act of misconduct, and they were involved in situations that where closer scrutiny and perhaps discipline was appropriate, but you rarely would hear about that.
What kind of an impact does that have, though? Because we just got done talking about it invalidates the process.
It invalidates the process, but it also creates a situation between the rank and file and management where officers feel that if you're a captain or above, you get the slide. And that's just a bad feeling for officers. Hey, we're out here, we're hustling, We're working, we're responding to calls for service, we're dealing with the bad guys, and we make a mistake, and a complaint is initiated, and we end up with 4 days. But command officers are involved in particular activity, and it goes throughout the department. People hear about it, but nothing ever happens. You don't ever see a situation where a command officer is suspended for a couple days or demoted in rank. You never hear of that, although it has happened. But I think it provides a bit of a sour taste in the mouth of police officers.
Oh, no, 100%. I appreciate you sharing with that with us. Look, what's going on now, and I didn't explain it well enough, is on this ballot, this measure, and they can, I'm sure someone please comment and let me know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has a lot to do with the fact that we're going to get rid of this border rights process, and they're going to leave the chief with the ultimate decision when it comes to serious misconduct to just terminate you, and then you're going to have to go through civil service and appeal to get your job back. So that's what's going on right now.
Really? Okay.
You participated or have been chosen in over 20 border rights hearings.
At least.
Approximately, ballpark. In these border rights, talk to me, man. What's that like? Because I know 2 of them were real serious. They were facing, as a matter of fact, I think in one out of the 2, you were telling me that you recommended termination. Can you just kind of share what the challenges were or about a specific border rights matter that you were involved in, and what can we learn from that?
One case involved a lieutenant. No, she was a sergeant of police who had come over from another agency. So when she came in to our agency, she already had a lot of experience. And she moved up the ranks. She was moving very, very quickly. She was a star, and it was clear. And she got involved in some matters off duty, which resulted in 19 allegations, and she was directed to a board of rights. 19 counts. 19 counts of misconduct that we had to adjudicate. So we went through the process, and we found in 10 of the most serious counts, there was insufficient evidence to find her guilty. It just was not there. And I think part of the reason for that is the advocate that was assigned was inexperienced. He was loaned in and given this big, high-profile case. And he couldn't make a determination where the evidence should lie. Count 1, count 4, count 6. He was very, very confused about his own investigation. It was overwhelming for him. And from my perspective, I thought it would be unfair on these serious allegations to find her guilty when the presentation was so faulty. The presentation of the evidence was so porous, and he was confused. And I thought that would be fundamentally unfair. And then on the other 9 counts, we found her guilty. 5 of the counts had good evidence, but the other 4, we just chose not to believe her because they were self-serving denial. No, I didn't do that. No, I wasn't there. No, I don't know about that. We just didn't believe her. And so we made a recommendation for 22-day suspension. Of course, the chief couldn't terminate her because we didn't make a recommendation for termination. And I was called, along with the other sworn command officer, into the chief's office, maybe about 3 weeks later. And we were asked by an assistant chief. The chief didn't say a word, but he was there. Why didn't you terminate her? And I explained to him what I just explained to you. And he said, well, why didn't you terminate her? I says, according to the guide for discipline, this was an appropriate recommendation for penalty. And he says, okay, thank you. Out the door. But the point I'm making here is we're placed in that seat of responsibility and authority. You got to do the right thing. And I wasn't going to be swayed by this high-profile case to do what the chief or a deputy chief or a bureau chief would want me to do, because I heard the evidence. Yeah. And we scrutinized every bit of it. Yeah. And I wasn't going to find this particular sergeant guilty if the evidence wasn't there. It wasn't there. So,
Commander, would you agree that the punishment's not the penalty, but the punishment is the process?
The punishment is the penalty. Mm-hmm. Because you can't mitigate misconduct. You can mitigate penalty.
Okay.
The misconduct is on its face. Either you did or you didn't. Either you committed the act of misconduct or you didn't. So the misconduct process produces a result: sustained, not sustained, guilty, not guilty. Mm-hmm. But once you have that classification, then you can look at the entire employee and then make a determination consistent with the guide to discipline what the penalty ought to be. So you can mitigate the recommendation for discipline, mm-hmm. but you cannot mitigate the actual misconduct and the investigation. You can't do that.
Right. What about someone who's waiting for this process to go? And that's where I was heading with the fact that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, it's how you're treated and waiting for this hearing to go down. Because you and I both know it takes months. Sometimes it even takes years. What do we do to make that process better? Because it seems as though that the treatment, meaning the process, it's almost as if that's kind of like the punishment, meaning I can be, if I know I committed misconduct and I know that in the end of the road it's going to be sustained because I did it occurred, and you're going to give me some punishment. Granted, it might be paper penalty or it might be 5-day suspension, whatever the case may be. But getting to that finish line, the way I was treated, it's almost as though that's more of the punishment. What do you think?
Yeah, there ought to be a process such that when you're relieved from duty, mm-hmm. pending a board of rights, that process has to be expedited. And I would think if the matter isn't directed to a board of rights within a certain day, a number of days, that investigation should be squashed. So now the burden is on the department to move this quickly because, as you mentioned, you have a person who's being relieved from duty and they're sitting and they're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And that fundamentally is not fair. Fundamentally is not fair. If the allegation is sustained and there's a recommendation that a person be directed to a board of rights, and if you make a determination that the person should be relieved from duty pending that board of rights, that has to be handled as a priority.
Yeah, I mean, you're the breadwinner, right? You're going home.
That has to be handled as a priority.
I beg to ask, have you had an accused employee that were waiting around and that you can think of where perhaps we could have done better?
Yeah, but I don't recall the particular investigation, but yeah, we've had that, and that's not something that a command officer in a geographic area can control. Mm-hmm. That's all upstairs. It's past the bureau. It's in internal affairs. We don't control any of that, but we know that process, the wait, is fundamentally unfair.
We can do better.
Yes, we should do better.
Yeah. Before we go to the next segment, let's final thoughts about our discipline process. Mm-hmm. I know you said it's good to have these levels of review. Mm-hmm. I tend to think that it's one too many hands in the cookie jar. I just feel as though you're the captain 1 and the captain 3. You guys have to make a decision. Mm-hmm. Then you got to go to bureau, and the commander and the deputy chief have to make a decision. Then it has to go to internal affairs, and a commander and a deputy chief also have to make a decision. And someone's got to go to the 10th floor and sell it to the chief or present it to the chief. And just from my experience, there's not really much concurrence with all levels. And I just feel like maybe perhaps there's a way to streamline that. What's your thoughts?
We have to get it right.
From the beginning.
From the time that, we have to take a complaint from any source, but from the time we conduct an investigation and we adjudicate the complaint and we move it on, we have to get it right. So I think that's one of the reasons why we have so many levels of review, because remember, adjudicating complaints isn't the only thing that a captain does. Mm-hmm. That's just maybe 10% of what he or she does. And then it goes to the bureau. That's 10% of what they do. Then when it goes to R&E and internal affairs, that's just a process to make certain that everything that comes in is formatted correctly, that is written correctly, and that the allegations have been adjudicated correctly, and that the recommendation for discipline is consistent with the guide to discipline. Then they move it up to the lieutenant and to the commanding officer of internal affairs, and they have to make certain that it's correct, because they're the ones that are going to have to present it to the chief.
Yes.
They can't take anything up there that's raggedy, and you can't have holes in your investigation, because if you suspend someone or direct them to a board of rights and terminate them, they're going to sue. And if those investigations aren't solid, you're going to lose.
No stone goes unturned.
No stone.
Man, that was good. You know what? I totally forgot, because I meant to ask you, and I want to go back to a trip down memory lane. Out of all these assignments, if you will, I know you had a favorite. And I remember you telling me in the many times that you and I rode in the car, and you taught me so much. You told me the story about RHD. I mean, come on. It's Robbery Homicide Division. It's the elite. Yeah. You promoted diversity within the unit. I remember you telling me that. Was not even in existence. Mm-hmm. And the Grim Reaper. We'll talk about that. Would that be considered one of your favorite assignments, or what do you think?
Yeah, the case involving Lonnie Franklin, the Grim Sleeper. When I arrived at RHD, I initiated a process called a major case briefing. I wanted to know about every single case in the entire division, from all of the 6 or 7 sections that were there at the time. And I wanted the case agent, the investigating officer who had a particular case, to tell me what he had and what the status of that case was. I wanted to know. Were we being productive? Were people working hard? Were they close to resolution? I wanted to know. But it was also a way for me to better understand the personnel in the division, and to understand all of the dynamics and units and how they worked and that kind of thing. So I went through the various units, and we got to the cold case section. And one case in particular had to do with a series of homicides involving African-American women who were prostitutes and abusers. And looking at the analysis and all of the information, there were about 32 of those cases that had occurred within, give or take, a 14-year period of time. He would commit some and he'd stop, commit some and he'd stop. Then a 7-year period went by where he didn't do anything, and then he started again. And I was just thinking in my head as they were briefing me, if this case were in West LA or Santa Monica, they'd have the FBI,
the whole nine,
Drug Enforcement Administration, everybody in the world would be down. Helicopters, Navy, Navy SEALs, everybody in the world would be here investigating this case. And I just said, fundamentally, that's wrong. We have to solve this case. So I put together a task force. The lieutenant headed it, and he identified D3, an experienced D3, and we staffed it and got them everything that they needed. I went to the chief of police to get the resources that I needed, and he gave it to me. And we put it together, and they reviewed every one of those cases again and looked at everything and made certain that if there were any forensic evidence that was appropriate to be entered into the CODIS system, CODIS database, that we did that. And so we went on for a period just looking at everything. And then we learned that in the Department of Justice, California Department of Justice, there's a panel that looks at familia DNA.
Okay.
It's the blood evidence, the DNA evidence from a male relative. So we wanted to know, based on all our investigations and the saliva and the blood evidence that was in CODIS, because when we put it in CODIS, there was no hit on our suspect. We didn't know who our suspect was, obviously, but there was no hit. So we asked for permission of this panel. We prepared an affidavit and submitted it, and they approved it, to allow the DNA in CODIS to seek a male relative. They approved it, and we got a hit. And from that hit, we were able to develop a profile on that relative. And we looked at all of his male relatives, and we started with the ones close in the area. And as a result of that, we were able to identify our suspect. And I was just thinking, after all these years, that case sat. And that gives me great, great pride to be the commanding officer. And I was the first executive in the state of California, law enforcement executive in the state of California, to sign an affidavit and have it approved. So that's for me, creates a great sense of pride that we were able to catch this guy through this hard work. Of course, I didn't do the work, but I set the mechanism up for it to occur. It was those detectives that did it. They did that work. And I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of the fact that Robbery Homicide Division was able to resolve that.
Wow. Thank you for that. Hey, give me a worse incident that happened in your career that probably had a positive outcome, or just something that sticks with you.
There's something that happened when I was a command officer.
Okay.
I had a deputy chief who, when she was the commanding officer of a detective division, had a sergeant that went out and did some terrible things with his special problems unit. Went outside of the city, did a bunch of things. They all got in trouble for it, but it was under her command, and she was really, really upset and angry about that. Let's move 10 years after that. When I became the commanding officer of Northeast, that particular sergeant was in my command, and he had been taken out of the field because this deputy chief would not allow him to work the field. So we went through a period of time, and I noted, and I would talk to him often, that he recognized the mistake that he made, and he wanted to do better. He was professional and polite, did everything that he was asked to do. And after a period of time, I felt that he had been rehabilitated. He went for counseling, went for training, and there was nothing else to do. And so I made a recommendation for him to be reinstated to the field, and through the REMAC process. Mm-hmm. And this deputy chief said, no. He said to the chair of the REMAC committee, let me speak with Captain Jackson, and we'll table this until our next meeting. So she asked me to go into his package and to rewrite a rating indicating that he was not suited to return to the field. And I know once an evaluation goes into a personnel package, it's protected by state law. You can't go and mess around with a person's personnel package or
Right.
put something in there that's improper or take something out. It's protected by state law. I said, Chief, I can't do that. That's improper. That's illegal. She says, no, you don't understand. I want you to go in and to resolve this issue. I want this rating changed. I says, I wasn't even the command officer
At the time.
in Northeast at the time. I can't do that. Jackson, you don't understand what I am saying to you. So I said, if you want that rating change, you're going to have to do it yourself, because I am not going to do it. And I know that had an impact on my career, because I was on the commander's list then and probably should have made it. And she said some disparaging, information got back to me. She said some disparaging things about me when they were about to make a selection, so they put me on hold. That's before I went to Robbery Homicide Division. And of course, I was disappointed by that. But, the whole issue of integrity is so important to me, and that was something I would never do. I would never do something so egregious to another member of this department that would falsify, because I would have to falsify a document.
Yeah, no,
And
you're being asked.
blocks, the signature blocks on the evaluation would be improper,
Yeah.
because I didn't directly supervise him. And what she was asking me to do could not be done. And so I didn't make commander. I didn't promote to commander on that list. But the end result was, went to the Robbery Homicide Division, had that great experience there, and I promoted to commander anyway. Came out number one on the list, and the rest is history. So it was a negative thing, but by doing the right thing, standing in integrity, I still prevailed. So
We kind of touched a little bit of the achievement, considering the Grim Reaper case. Anything else you can think of that's a big achievement?
well,
in your career?
There are a couple of cases in our Robbery Homicide Division that I can't talk about.
Right,
I
no,
don't want to
totally.
talk about.
What about in criminal gang homicide group?
Nothing significant other than the fact that we had a good clearance rate. I have something I'm pretty proud of. When I was a commanding officer at Southwest, when I walked in the door, we had the greatest increase in crime in the city. And within 6 months, we had reduced it by our crime rate by 15%. And at the end of the year, we had the deepest decrease in crime in the city of Los Angeles. And all of that was done without notices to correct and personal complaints and trying to browbeat officers. What we tried to do is inspire them and give them good leadership, good direction, good guidance from their supervisors to do specific things in specific areas at specific times. And it resulted in good measure for us at Southwest. And in ComStat, we were acknowledged as having pushed crime down to 40-year lows. I was very proud of that.
Yeah.
I was very proud of that. And it wasn't so much that we were trying to get the numbers. What we were trying to do is serve people. You know, those areas that were chronic areas for crime and public disorder, we cleaned all that stuff up. And we engaged the community and we brought them on board with us as a partner. And it resulted in good measure. I was very proud of that.
Yeah. Well, well, probably too humble or don't remember more things you're proud of. I can tell you that when we met, that's something to be proud of. We got involved in a project.
Yes.
Where we did a multi-jurisdictional, multi-function program that involved the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation and the mayor's office,
Right.
where we had to integrate parolees into
The community,
into Watts, zip codes 9002 and 958. I remember that clearly. And somehow, some way, I found us a grant of $434,000 from the feds, right? And all under your guidance, we started a unit. We dealt with parolees. And I'm taking you back to right before you retired. This is in 2007, 2008. Times have changed.
Yes.
Considering that would be considered. I remember you telling me it's very counterculture for police to be involved with parolees.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is. It's our task. I don't want to say our responsibility, but our task is to identify perpetrators, law violators, to take them into custody and to present them before the bar of justice through the DA's office. It's not our job to look at parolees and try to help them stay out of prison. That's against the culture. You look at the definition of culture, a traditional way of acting, thinking, and behaving. That's not what we did. It's not what we do. But I think it's so significant because what could happen in a community when men are at home and are working and serving in their own communities? What could happen? Look at how we could just uplift a whole generation of young, particularly young men in at-risk communities. I just think it's something that we should focus on. We may not have to lead it, but we need to be a participant in it. Just, the whole issue of, I don't remember what the numbers are, but the whole issue of recidivism, 30%, 33% of everyone that's released from prison is back in prison within 6 or 9 months.
Churning.
Yeah. So something is missing, and we can't just say, okay, lock them up, because that hasn't worked in 50 years. Got to do something different.
Yeah.
And it's got to be a multi-agency approach where we deal with the entire person and the community. And all of the entities within the community need to have enough resources to pour in to that process to keep those men out of prison. Because I always thought, a guy is arrested for burglary. Why do you commit a burglary? Why do you commit a robbery? You need money. What if there is a job opportunity or a training available such that you can get a job making $40,000, $50,000 a year? Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah.
Well, let's make that happen because we're spending more than that incarcerating them.
Yeah, totally.
So we're seeing it wrong, I think.
Parting words.
Yes.
What would you tell this next generation? I mean, you've been out of the game you've been retired for
almost 15. This year will be 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah, long time.
What would you say to anyone who wants to get involved in law enforcement?
I would say that it's worthwhile. It's challenging, but it's fulfilling. And people in the community need you. They don't just want you to be there. They need you to be there, but the manner in which you present yourself is so critical. The whole idea of yes, ma'am, no, sir, is important. Because we don't want people in the community to feel like we, the Los Angeles Police Department, are an occupying force. We want people in the community to feel that we're partners and that we care about their community. We care about them. And we want to work with them. So for those young officers that are coming in, please understand, you might be out in patrol right now. You might be a supervisor in patrol, police officer in patrol. But one day a good number of you could become command officers. And you're going to have the responsibility for looking not just at a radio call that you respond to or an emergency that you lead at a command post, sergeants. You'll be looking at the entire operation of a division. And the whole community is depending on you doing the right thing, training your people, making certain that they understand the rules, policies, and procedures of the organization. And when they step out of line, that you're going to do the right thing to modify their behavior so that that act of misconduct does not recur. And so that we send a message to the rest of the department that this is what will happen if you engage in misconduct. Captains don't want to see those personnel complaints come in. They don't want to see them. They don't want to adjudicate them. They want you to go out and follow the rules and treat people decently. So that's what I would say.
Wow. Look, just fun fact. One of, at least I think this way, is one of the reasons why you didn't want to be a police officer is because you're a 49er, man.
49.
Let's see. Long Beach State.
Cal State Long Beach.
Yeah, played for Jerry Tarkanian
Tarkanian.
for the Shark
Yes, on a team ranked third in the nation
at the time.
at the time. Yeah.
Trailblazers looked at you for a little bit,
Let's not talk about that. That's embarrassing.
but you weren't a full-blown athlete that just wanted to play ball and do all that.
No, when I was in college, I was a good college basketball player, but I knew I wasn't pro material. I knew that.
Right.
I was a student athlete, and that's what I did, and I was okay with that.
I have to tell my story before we wrap it up. That I remember when I first made sergeant. I was at the Parker Center, my promotion ceremony with my mom, and I went upstairs to get my badge or my ID, and Kenny Garner comes by. I haven't seen him in so long, and with a big old smile, and he just looks at me. He goes, "You know what? I got something for you, baby boy." And that was back in when I made it in 2000. I made January 2007. And about a year and a half later, he hires me to meet you.
Yes.
My mother is a woman of Christ. My brother was a Bible thumper at one time. We're all children of Christ. At one point, we believed a lot in Christianity. When I met you, till this very day, I still haven't heard you say one profane language, one bad word, cussing. It's not in your it's not in your style. And what I'm trying to say is that you're the one who told me that I use this all the time, is that God does his best work through people. We are instruments.
That's true.
And I felt that when I met you, that was the instrument to get me closer to God, to get me closer to Christianity. And I learned so much. Things like, I remember you telling me, be nice to everybody. Be nice to people, even if you don't like them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, even the ones that don't like you and you're nice to them, they're going to do something for you. Mm-hmm. You know, that's super important. Mm-hmm. One thing that stuck to me in my career that's helped me a lot in my success was you always told me, Marlon, whatever you do in this job, don't ever let it be about politics and egos. No. Leave it at the door. It's never about you.
No.
And that to me stuck with me. Luckily, when I met you, when I was a sergeant 15 years later, when I would do presentations and we would get together and, why put your name on their PowerPoint slide when they know who you are? And they're going to know. Mm-hmm. They're going to know who's up there speaking. And if they want your information, maybe in the end you can just give them your information in the end. But I thank you so much for developing me professionally and more than anything personal. So to me, I've been looking forward to this conversation we're having. And Commander, I couldn't thank you enough.
Thank you.
So on that note, please be safe out there and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.